Hello everyone, today we're going to take a look at the Sub250 1S NanoFly20. So 2-inch props on this one. Comes in a couple different versions. You can get it with HD0 or WalkSnail as we have here, and analog is also available. The motors are 1002, 20,000 kV, and on those motors are new HQ tri-bladed 51mm props. The all-in-one flight controller down here is the Red Fox A1 F4. It's a 5 amp 4-in-1 ESC. Of course, in this particular case with the WalkSnail version, we have the WalkSnail Avatar 1S board. It is the new board, but it doesn't have the new nano camera that you may have seen on my channel. It's got the original nano camera. So it's a bit heavier. Comes stock with a G&B 27 connector. And the receiver on this is ExpressLRS, and it is version 2.5, so you'll need a 2.5 version radio or module in order to bind to it. They offer this 1S 530 milliamp battery on their website with of course, the G&B 27 connector, and it does fit the battery tray that's printed in 3D material down here. It fits that well, but if you don't want to or you don't have any of these batteries, the G&B branded versions fit just fine and give you the same amount of flight time. It weighs nearly 42.5 grams. With the Sub250 battery, it weighs almost 55 grams. Carbon fiber looks to be 1.5 millimeters thick. And motor post to motor post, it looks like about 88 millimeters. It comes with a charging adapter for your prototypical PH20 to G&B sort of connection. You get a USB cable so you can get the files off the Avata Mini 1S Lite VTX, as well as any firmware updates you might need to apply. We get a tiny little screwdriver, spare set of HQ 51mm tri-bladed props, just like the stock ones, a little hex Allen key, and a couple little screws. We get a little tiny wire map for the board. Note down there at the bottom by my thumb, the voltage. Nope, not 2S compatible. We get a quick start guide, which covers DJI setup, as well as a receiver for the TBS option, as well as your ExpressLRS SPI receiver binding. Yeah, it's an ExpressLRS receiver, as I mentioned previously. 2.5 is the version on that. If you want to go to version 3, you need to download that special hex from Betaflight of 4.3. Make sure you take a CLI backup of your current version. Backside of the quick start manual shows D16, which oddly enough isn't on their page, at least not when I looked. Mode setup, prop orientation, and ready to take off. And last but not least is a guide for the WalkSnail Avata 1S Mini Lite. It does also fit in the box that it's shipped in with the props on. Okay, as we prepare to take off, this is, in my opinion, primarily a low-wind 1S cruiser. You're gonna find that even with the very low wind that I actually waited for after flying it in several different mile per hour, you know, here in the US, that's how we measure our wind. So I tried it in 14 mile an hour winds. I tried it in 11 mile an hour winds. I tried it at, I think it was 10. I didn't write that one down, but I remember seeing 10 on my phone when I looked one day when I flew it. This day, I saw it on the calendar and I thought, oh, if I can just be patient, wait a couple more days, we'll get this real low wind. It was initially reported that it was going to be 4 miles an hour, which is incredibly low for my time of year. But it turns out it was 6. When the day came, we had a little bit more wind than what the weatherman had predicted a few days earlier. So for me, this is extraordinarily light wind. This is whoop sort of flying outdoors light wind. But in this particular case, even as the breeze does kind of kick up every once in a while, you're going to find some bobbles. We also have some camera in view. Back to the bobbles, it could just be a PID tune issue. There are some magicians out there when it comes to PID tune. I did not tinker with the PID tune. Personally, I think, and I reported this to Sub250, I think this needs to be 2S. I think they need to drop the kV to 10,000 kV or 9,000 kV and make it 2S. I just don't think we have the prop control on 1S in order to get a real good tune at it, and we certainly can't fly it very aggressively, as I'll show you in the next flight segment. And some of this flight gets a little bit more turny, but that's kind of how I think that most people would fly this in its current iteration. If you're going to go out and enjoy this, it would just be kind of, you know, a slow, cruisy sort of, you know, explore your environment sort of flight, and that's kind of what I'm doing. Of course, I can work in a flip and a roll, and you do see some bobbles, and I'll highlight that in the next segment of my video as well, which I think for the most part is going to go unnarrated. Many of you may know that I do a bunch of flights on quads, and then I narrate them at my desk. In this particular case, for the second flight, I think I'm going to let that flight and myself at the time of flying speak for itself. And I don't know exactly why I was talking so much. Maybe I had too much coffee. So I kind of ruined the flight audio to a degree for my typical format. But I do think it's worthwhile to just hear me in the moment and talk about my flight experience with this particular quad. Hopefully Sub250 comes back with the 2S version, because we can cruise 2S versions as well. And as their name implies, yes, it's well under sub 250 or 250 grams, but we have a lot of headroom there to where if we added a 2S battery, it would still be way under 250 grams. We may want to see an extra ½ millimeter or even a full millimeter on the carbon fiber thickness, which of course would change their screw lengths on their motors. So they may have a little bit of a barrier if they're not prepared already to do that. 1002 motors in general, I don't find them to be all that efficient. My bias, based upon my experience of building 2S quads, which I've been calling for quite a while, 2+ years I do think, dating back to the Rocket Race, they have their place, but I think the 1002 motor best works on a 2-inch bi-blade as well as on 2S. You can run a 1002 motor on a 40 millimeter prop and they work pretty well. I think for micros and the weight savings that you get, it's worth to drop down to 0802. I say all that as a tip for anyone who might be building that's not actually interested in this particular quad. That is the end of our slow cruisy flight, and I do believe that came in at 3 minutes and 50 seconds. This is going to be our more aggressive flight, and I have a crash in it, so I'll cut that part out. But I'm just going to let myself, real time, as I'm flying it, speak for this flight and my thoughts, which you kind of already heard. Well, dang. Let's go get it. All right. Let's try another dive. Okay, full throttle and pitch up. that was all she had right there. Try a shorter one. Oh, I had to pull out really soon there. Now the battery voltage is pretty low. Oh, I had to full throttle to stop that speed. This could be dangerous. I just don't think these motors with these props give us enough prop control to get a good tune out of it. I think it needs to be 2S. Drop the kV on the motors to about 10,000, maybe even 9,000, and run it on 2S voltage. But I don't know if the board's capable of that. See there, I have to full throttle to stop that. Just like on those dives. See a little bobble there, little bobble there. Yeah, we just don't have the prop control. We certainly don't have enough throttle to fly very aggressively. Yes, I'm almost full throttle right there. Of course, at the end of the battery, 3.27. It's full throttle. Full throttle, full throttle. Yeah. So 1S Calm Day Cruiser. And so I got 3 minutes of flight time, and my voltage is coming back up. It was down at like 316, I think I saw. Now it's up to 3.47. So it's not, the battery isn't killed. But we lack some thrust and some efficiency. Pit tune could help. A new PID tune, that is, excuse me. I just think it needs to be 2S though. 2S, drop the KV, 10,000 kV, 9 and 10,000 kV. Yeah, now the voltage is starting to drop on the battery again. 3.35 now. I better go unplug. It's getting low. So I think the idea behind this is solid, and I applaud some of the things that they did do with this. One, they left plenty of lead out back here, so if you want to fly batteries like they have, a stick battery with the end connected, that you will be able to connect it without having to do any sort of lead lengthening or anything like that. Of course, if your battery has a lead on it, what I do is I just have the battery lead up here and I connect them here over here on the side. The carbon fiber seems to be, for 1.5 millimeter, it seems to be about what we expect in thickness. They also did a few things that I also have to mention. You saw it in the flight, how we had just a touch of the canopy in view, and so that provides us a little bit of lens protection, and this was the camera angle that the faster flight came at. But you see here we have a secondary hole, so we could move the camera forward in order to get a pure, unadulterated, clear view of just the camera itself. Also, they've got this wire that comes out the top, neatly placed. I always appreciate that, because oftentimes in micros especially, we'll find the antenna just kind of loosely about. I appreciate that they secured it. It is a little bit interesting that the lead length, it goes clear underneath this plastic mount, which helps to firm up the flight stack, as well as underneath down to the board. We have motor connectors on here, as you might expect, and they've created this battery tray to where the battery should not come in contact with the USB port, so that's always a good thing. We don't want stuff bonking into the USB port and knocking our USB port off, because then that causes future heartache, with changing configuration, whether it be Betaflight or rebinding or something like that. They did put the wires around here, which is fine. I've done that on builds myself. It does decrease the chance that you get a branch, if they're just loosely out here, that a branch or something, as you tumble through a bush or a tree, get tangled up in there and you pull a motor wire loose. Speaking of the motors, we do have a little PCB down here. You can probably barely see it as I get enough light. So the motor wires are soldered onto that PCB, and then that PCB connects to the motor actual wires. That's a good thing, so if you pull one of these loose by chance, you will be able to do a repair. Speaking of motors and individual components, right now, if I get this video out very, very quickly, they have a sale going on through January 4th of 2023 on various products. They have different rates of discount on their website for various things, whether you're interested in their motors, their props, anything that they make up their quads with, or maybe you have another one of their quads and you're looking to buy some spare parts. Might be a good time to head up their site. I don't know about their shipping time frames though, so that's something to investigate. Canopy's well designed. Of course we have that plastic piece in here, which helps to firm up our stack. You see let me try to grab this and wiggle it. It's going to be hard to tell, but that's pretty firm for a 2-layer stack. Usually when I build these, I put a metal nut on the bottom, and then I try to add another metal nut just below my canopy. They went this route, which seems to work out just fine. It does mean that if you have to get down to the wiring on the FC, that you've got technically 2 layers to remove to get down to that. Not a terrible thing, not unusual, but something to note as well. VTX antenna is secured here. I didn't have any problems with it coming out. Matter of fact, just tugging on it here, pretty secure. Of course, with 1S batteries, if they eject, it's rare that maybe I should just leave that up to everyone. Have you had a 1S battery where you had a crash where the connection was so firm that you pulled the battery pads off your all-in-one flight controller? I haven't had that experience on 1S batteries. On larger batteries with, say, an XT30 connection on it, I have had that experience, unfortunately. So I just want to pause there for a moment to give you all a moment to comment about your experience pulling battery leads off all-in-ones in the case of 1S, whether it's GNB or BT20 or PH20 connectors. Generally, they come apart fairly well, so you wouldn't get that much pressure on a battery ejection after a crash. But I do want to get some feedback on that as well. Also, notice that we have the heat shield on this particular board, and this is the new board, so Cadix or WalkSnail says we can remove that heat shield and save, I think it's 1.5 grams. So I'm a little surprised that Sub250 didn't do that in this case. So if you're not interested in this particular quad, one that I did think was more fun to fly, quite honestly, is the NanoFly20. It's smaller propped, it's smaller overall. I flew the analog version, so if they have HD versions, of course, that's going to change things with weight. Probably increase the weight, 7 or 8 grams. If you get the WalkSnail version, HD0 version, a little bit less. But in this particular case, I just think this one is limited to very low wind and slow sort of cruising. Aggressive flight, as I showed you, while it's kind of possible, it's extra challenging and it doesn't give you that good of experience. I think a revamping of this to 2S with lower KV motors would be a really good idea. If you're interested in the Sub250 NanoFly20 or the 16, as I would suggest looking at as well, or any of their components that are under sale, I'll have a link or links down in the video description to where you can check them out, look at the pricing, see if the pricing is competitive, especially the savings side of things. You may find sales elsewhere this time of year where you can actually save more money through a different vendor. But for right now, this is one that I don't think too many people would enjoy. I think it would be much more fun if it were 2S. My bias, 2S is my bias when it comes to mini micros, but I've showed you everything that I had to experience and tried to share it with you here. Sub250, make a 2S version of this. I'd love to see a 2S version. Whether it's analog, WalkSnail, HD0, or even DJI. Oh, speaking of WalkSnail, if you're looking at this, you've got to have these goggles. These are the Fat Shark Dominator HDs. Or you can get the WalkSnail version, which are all black. Of course, I have aftermarket antennas on here. Or you can get the WalkSnail VRX and attach it to analog goggles that you might already own. So that is required. Also keep in mind, this is an SPI receiver, so if you need version 3 of XpressLRS, we need to get that Betaflight 4.3 special file that does have XpressLRS version 3 cooked into it, because it's SPI based. We can't flash the receiver by itself. It's part of Betaflight. And I'll try to find that and link that down in the video description down below as well. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.